They didn't destroy your life by accident. They did it with pinpoint precision. And the most frightening part isn't that they took pleasure in the fire. The most frightening part is that they're standing in the wreckage right now, fully convinced that you were the one who lit the match. If you've ever walked away from someone with your confidence broken, your resources drained, and your sense of reality completely twisted, you're not going crazy. You're simply trapped in the blast radius of a psychological black hole that swallows everything and leaves nothing behind. Leave a comment below if you've ever felt that no matter how much you gave, how far you bent, or how much you burned yourself out just to keep them comfortable, it still wasn't enough. Because today we're going to look closely at chronic dysfunction and figure out why destruction is simply their default setting. The core illusion of a narcissistic dynamic is that it looks like a mutual partnership, when in truth, it's a carefully built resource extraction operation. When you get involved with someone shaped by deep narcissistic patterns, you naturally bring human reciprocity into the connection, expecting a fair trade of emotional investment, openness, and mutual support. But underneath, their psychology doesn't treat other people as independent partners with real dignity and feelings. It treats them as tools built to serve one purpose: regulating their ego and supplying what they need. This extraction starts quietly. At first, the dynamic can feel deeply validating, full of intense attention and affection meant to lower your defenses and lock in your emotional investment. This early stage works almost like laying down a pipeline. Once that emotional bond is secured, the real extraction begins. Your empathy, your time, your patience, your forgiveness, and your mental energy get pulled away little by little to hold up a fragile, hollow identity that can't create its own sense of worth. Every exchange becomes a transaction on an invisible scale, where you're always the one expected to give, adjust, and absorb their emotional swings, while getting almost nothing real back in return. When you try to speak up about a need, set a boundary, or express that you're hurt, the system reacts with resistance. Instead of responding with genuine care, they see your basic human needs as a threat to their supply. They don't see a hurt partner asking for comfort. They see a resource trying to shut off the flow. So what feels like a loving relationship to you is treated by them like a mine to be dug. They pull out your confidence, your peace, and your energy until the well runs completely dry. Once that resource is used up, meaning you've become too tired, too aware, or too worn down to keep offering validation, they start looking elsewhere for a new supply. Understanding this pattern matters because it takes the blame off your shoulders. The exhaustion and emptiness you feel aren't proof that you communicated wrong or didn't love them enough. They're simply the predictable result of dealing with an emotional extractor who sees your life force as fuel for a void that can never be filled. The devaluation engine is the main way someone with severe narcissistic traits keeps their inner balance by pushing their chaos onto others. Because their psychological foundation is cracked, brittle, and constantly afraid of being exposed, they can't sit quietly with their own mistakes, flaws, or feelings of not being enough. Underneath it all, they carry a deep sense of emptiness and shame that feels completely unbearable to their fragile ego. To shield themselves from that inner pain, they unconsciously and repeatedly dump that chaos onto the people closest to them. This is exactly why calm environments so often turn into battlegrounds the moment a narcissist enters the picture. Peace demands quiet reflection, honesty about your own faults, and the emotional strength to face your inner world without falling apart. But for a narcissist, stillness feels dangerous because it forces them to look at the very emptiness they've spent their whole life avoiding. When their inner world is churning with anxiety, anger, or self-hatred, they'll actively stir up trouble around them until the outside matches the storm inside by starting conflict, picking fights over nothing, or launching sudden emotional attacks. They successfully hand off their inner turmoil to you. Once that chaos moves out of them and into the space around them, something shifts inside. Suddenly they feel calm, steady, and in control while you're left spinning, confused, and trying to make sense of a storm that came out of nowhere. They've essentially unloaded their emotional weight and made you carry it instead. That's exactly why trying to reason with them in these moments never works. They're not looking for a logical solution. They're feeding off the friction itself, because that friction is what settles their nervous system. By turning a peaceful home into a battlefield, they stabilize their fragile ego at the direct cost of your peace, your emotional balance, and your well-being, leaving you drained while they walk away perfectly composed. The entitlement trap is rooted in a warped view of reality, one where other people are stripped of their individuality, independence, and emotional freedom. In a healthy relationship, two separate people move through life with mutual respect, understanding that each person has their own limits, needs, thoughts, and boundaries. But someone with narcissistic traits operates from a completely different mental framework, seeing the world through a lens of grandiosity and self-focus. In that distorted view, people aren't seen as independent individuals living their own lives. They're absorbed as extensions of the narcissist's own ego. That means your role in their eyes isn't to be a partner, friend, or loved one with needs of your own. It's to serve as a prop that exists purely to meet their emotional, social, or practical demands. The moment you step outside that script, by disagreeing, putting yourself first, or saying no to something unreasonable, the narcissist doesn't see a normal, healthy boundary. They experience your independence as betrayal, as defiance, and as a direct threat to their control. To them, your independence proves you exist separately from them, and that shatters the illusion that they're the center of everything. This entitlement shows up as an expectation of endless accommodation with no obligation to give anything back. They genuinely believe they're special, that they deserve extra privileges, that ordinary rules of courtesy don't apply to them, and that everyone around them owes them full compliance. When you try to stand up for yourself or expect basic fairness, they respond with outrage, anger, or bitter resentment, treating your reasonable expectations like an unfair burden. They truly feel wronged when you assert your own humanity, because doing so breaks the fantasy that everyone and everything around them exists only to validate, manage, and feed their never-ending need for ego reinforcement. The chaos cycle often looks random, frantic, and draining to anyone caught inside it. But to someone driven by narcissistic patterns, it's actually a very deliberate and functional tool of control. What outsiders or victims might mistake for poor emotional control or random anger is, in reality, a calculated strategy used to break down boundaries, wear away confidence, and hold on to complete dominance. Real chaos serves a very specific job in these dynamics. It keeps the target constantly off balance, reactive, and totally focused on handling whatever crisis is happening right now, instead of stepping back and seeing the bigger picture of the relationship. When someone is repeatedly hit with shifting expectations, sudden outbursts, manufactured emergencies, and rules that keep changing, their mental energy gets swallowed up entirely by survival mode. In that constant state of high alert, deep thinking and trust in your own judgment start to break down. You stop asking whether the relationship is actually healthy or sustainable, and instead spend all your energy putting out the current fire, calming the anger, or trying to stop the next explosion before it happens. This deliberate breakdown targets the very core of your independence and self-trust by keeping you guessing, doubting your own memory of events, and questioning your reactions. The narcissist makes sure you never find stable ground. On top of that, this cycle blocks any real accountability. Whenever a conflict comes up that exposes their bad behavior, the chaos cycle gets deployed instantly as a smokescreen. All of a sudden, the focus moves away from what they did and lands on how you reacted to what they did. Your completely justified anger, tears, or frustration get reframed as the actual problem, painting you as unstable, overly emotional, or even abusive. You end up apologizing for reacting to their own provocation, completely losing sight of what started it all. This calculated tearing down of your boundaries and self-perception keeps you tied down, dependent, and easy to control, trapped in a loop where every cycle leaves you weaker and them more firmly in charge. If this is hitting close to home and you're tired of doubting your own reality, hit that subscribe button right now. We spend our lives trying to fix environments that were built to break us, and it's time to stop. Take a breath, hit subscribe, and let's work through how to build boundaries that can't be broken, so you never have to be collateral damage again. The exploitation of empathy is one of the most damaging parts of a narcissistic dynamic, because it turns your greatest human strength into a weapon that's used against you. In a healthy relationship, things like compassion, understanding, emotional maturity, and a willingness to forgive are what hold people together through hard times. But when you're dealing with someone who lacks real empathy and operates from a place of exploitation, those same qualities become the main tools of your entrapment. They know that your ability to see things from different angles, make room for human weakness, and offer endless second chances gives them plenty of space to behave destructively without facing real, lasting consequences. When a narcissist hurts, manipulates, or betrays you, they lean heavily on your empathy to absorb the fallout of what they've done. Instead of owning it, they turn to victim stories, tearful apologies, or long explanations rooted in their own past pain. Something often called pity play. Because you have a deep capacity for compassion, you naturally start to humanize their pain, making excuses for their cruelty by telling yourself they're just wounded, misunderstood, or fighting battles no one else can see. Your empathy lets you look past behavior that shouldn't be tolerated and focus instead on their potential, or on the painful past that supposedly made them this way. This creates a dangerous loop where your understanding and forgiveness become a blank check for more mistreatment down the road. The more compassion you show, the more permission they feel they have to push your limits even further. Knowing your empathy will soften the blow and keep you from walking away. They turn your own conscience into a weapon against you, making you feel guilty for being angry, accusing you of lacking grace, or twisting the story until you start believing your own lack of patience is what's really breaking the relationship. In the end, your beautiful ability to love and understand others gets systematically used against you, keeping you tied to a dynamic that's draining your spirit and punishing you for the very kindness you bring into it. The smear and isolate strategy is a calculated defensive move designed to protect the narcissist's fragile public image while cutting off your access to outside reality and support. Since their sense of self is built entirely on a false image of perfection, charm, and superiority, any threat to that image has to be shut down before it can spread. The moment you start seeing through their act, expressing unhappiness or pulling back, they sense that you've become a danger to their reputation. To protect themselves, they strike first, rewriting the story of the relationship to friends, family, coworkers, and mutual acquaintances long before you even realize what's happening. This process, sometimes called triangulation or smearing, involves painting you as unstable, difficult, overly sensitive, or abusive. They take pieces of private conversations out of context, exaggerate your emotional reactions, or flat out invent stories to present themselves as the patient, long-suffering victim of your supposed toxicity. Because they're often remarkably charming and good at hiding their behavior in public, people outside the relationship get fooled easily, rallying around the narcissist with sympathy and support. This clever manipulation sets the stage for your complete isolation, so that if you ever try to speak up or ask for help, your credibility has already been quietly chipped away in advance. As the outside story hardens against you, your isolation grows naturally deeper. The narcissist may actively discourage you from spending time with friends or family who could offer a healthy, independent point of view, using guilt, manufactured emergencies, or quiet disapproval to pull you further from your support system. Once you're cut off from those outside connections, you lose your anchors to reality. Without friends or family to show you what's actually normal and healthy, you become completely dependent on the narcissist's version of events. This starvation of outside perspective speeds up your self-doubt, making it incredibly hard to trust your own memory, see the abuse clearly, or find the courage to leave, leaving you trapped inside their closed, distorted world. The complete inability to repair is one of the most defining and draining traits of a relationship shaped by narcissistic pathology. In any normal, healthy relationship, conflict is bound to happen, but it actually serves a useful purpose. Healthy conflict follows a familiar pattern. Tension builds, feelings get expressed, emotions run high, and eventually both people work toward repair. This repair stage involves mutual accountability, honest apologies, a genuine attempt to understand the other person's side, and a real commitment to doing better going forward. Repair rebuilds emotional safety, restores trust, and strengthens the bond between two people, letting the relationship grow through hardship instead of being damaged by it. In sharp contrast, a narcissistic dynamic completely breaks this natural process, making real repair impossible. When conflict brings their bad behavior, mistakes, or cruelty into the light, the narcissist experiences what feels like a deep wound to their ego. Because admitting fault threatens their fragile, inflated self-image, they simply cannot handle accountability. Instead of working toward resolution, they hijack the entire conflict through deflection, gaslighting, shifting the goalposts, or stirring up a brand new crisis. The original issue gets buried instantly under counter-accusations, old grievances, and defensive anger, turning every disagreement into an exhausting battle instead of a step toward healing. As a result, trying to work things out with them leaves you mentally drained instead of giving you any real closure. You end up stuck in circular arguments that go nowhere, constantly defending your character against baseless accusations. Eventually, worn down and desperate for peace, you give in. You find yourself apologizing for their behavior, soothing their wounded pride, and taking the blame just to make the friction stop. This leaves the real wound completely untouched, quietly building resentment and despair underneath the surface. The relationship turns into a stack of unresolved hurts piled on top of each other, where nothing ever really gets fixed. Nothing is ever learned, and you're left carrying the full weight of a broken dynamic that they refuse to repair. True freedom from a narcissistic dynamic starts the moment you completely let go of the idea that you can fix, heal, or reason your way into a healthy outcome with someone who isn't capable of real self-reflection. For months, maybe even years, you've probably poured your energy into trying to make them understand your pain, hoping that just the right mix of patience, love, or logical explanation would finally unlock some empathy and spark real accountability. But holding on to that hope keeps you stuck in an endless cycle of emotional self-harm, because healing simply cannot happen inside the same environment that caused the wound in the first place. Real freedom requires fully accepting the truth that you're dealing with a deep-rooted pattern you didn't cause, can't control, and definitely can't fix on your own. Taking back your sense of self means turning your attention completely away from them and pouring that fierce, exhausted energy back into yourself. This process begins with pulling away, not just physically, if that kind of separation is possible, but emotionally and mentally as well. It means breaking the trauma bond by cutting off the emotional supply lines that keep you tied to their approval, their reactions, and their twisted version of events. You have to stop waiting for an apology that's never going to come. And you have to let go of the desperate need for closure from someone whose entire way of seeing the world is built on avoidance and denial. Closure isn't something they can hand you. It's something you create for yourself through the quiet, deliberate choice to walk away from the chaos and stop taking part in the dysfunction. As you step outside their distorted world, the fog slowly starts to lift. The recovery process takes real gentleness and patience with your own nervous system. And you'll need to rebuild your self-trust from scratch, learning how to listen to your own intuition again after years of having your reality denied and rewritten. Every time you honor a boundary, validate your own feelings, or choose peace over conflict, you're reclaiming your right to exist without walking on eggshells. You start to realize that the wreckage left behind doesn't define your future. Instead, you begin to understand that ash is actually the richest soil there is. And from the exact space where their destruction ended, you finally have the freedom to build a life that's completely your own, rooted in unshakable self-worth, clarity, and peace. The destruction you went through was never a reflection of your worth, your strength, or your ability to love. It was a direct reflection of their limitations. You cannot love someone out of a deep-rooted pattern like this And there's no amount of yourself you can sacrifice that will ever fill an endless, bottomless void. The moment you stop trying to make sense of something senseless and let go of the hope that they'll suddenly wake up and see your pain, the fog begins to clear. Real recovery isn't about getting an apology that will never come. It isn't about forcing them to understand the damage they caused either. It's about reclaiming your peace, rebuilding your self-trust, and realizing that you survived a storm that was built specifically to wipe you out. You're standing in the ashes right now. Yes. But remember, ash is the richest soil on earth, and you're standing in the exact space where their destruction finally ended.